Cronkite News starts now.
Good evening and welcome to this special edition of Cronkite News on Arizona PBS. I'm Molly Hudson. Thank you for joining us. Tonight we're taking a look at stories from our sustainability team, from Vice President Kamala Harris's visit to Lake Mead to hiking restrictions in extreme heat.
Lake Mead hit its lowest water levels in history as severe drought hit the West this year. Vice President Kamala Harris visited the lake today to discuss the effect of water shortages and climate change. Reporter Julia SANDOR took a look at how these effects could impact Arizona.
25 million people in Arizona, Nevada, California, and Mexico all get their water supply from Lake Mead and the Colorado River. Vice President Harris says we should invest in climate resilience through the Build Back Better agenda and the bipartisan infrastructure deal, in hopes that it could help the 4 million Arizonans still living in drought. 34% of Arizona is experiencing severe to exceptional drought conditions. This comes after a summer of wildfires that burned nearly 6.5 million acres across the country.
Right now, all the western states, 90% of the western states are facing some level of drought. So when we look at what's happening here, we know this is about this lake, but it is about a region and it is about our nation.
Water supply and drought preparation for Western communities are two major points in the bipartisan infrastructure deal. The bill would invest $4.6 billion in aging infrastructure and rural water projects, and over $2 billion for water conservation, recycling, and storage.
So the focus will be on the long-term drought, diminishing Colorado River flows, and money is not going to lead to more flows, but money can be used to create opportunities for water users at a large scale to invest in efficiencies or other programs to conserve water in Lake Mead.
Water shortages have a big impact on farmers, food supply, and the economy. And Harris says the legislation could help bring jobs and generational benefits to our community.
Let's understand that right now we have a moment where we have the ability to actually benefit future generations and be transformational in a way that will not only be about life, but about this beautiful planet and beautiful places like Lake Mead.
The vice president says the investments in the reconciliation framework could possibly slow down the climate impacts of droughts and help restore our basic infrastructure. According to the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, the water level in Lake Mead is only about 1,067 feet above the mean sea level. And the vice president is hopeful that the largest investment in climate resilience will benefit our community. In the newsroom, Julia SANDOR, Cronkite News.
The Colorado River drought has brought bad news to farmers across the Southwest. Some farmers already face drastic shortages, and more water cuts are expected as we enter 2022. However, reporter Diana Quintero tells us about a new technology that could bring some relief to farmers.
This new technology comes from an Israeli company that is now being tested around the world. It's being used to grow sorghum in Australia, sugarcane in Thailand, and now cotton here in Arizona.
The Central Arizona Project is developing several initiatives to make Arizona's water more reliable in the future. They are focused on water conservation, desalination, and recycling, as well as irrigation efficiency.
We're optimistic that over the next 5 to 10 years, we'll have a new array of tools to improve the water supply to Arizona.
One new tool is a partnership with the Israeli company Endrip. It converts flood-irrigated fields into a drip system that uses gravity with no external form of energy.
And flood irrigation is by far the most water-consumptive, wasteful, unsustainable, bad for the world possible use of irrigation.
Siegel says Endrip helps save 50% of the water used and increases the yield. Endrip is already successful in Israel's hot and dry climate. A farm in Tonopah is testing the new technology. They found they saved 30% of their water used to grow cotton.
I've been very pleasantly surprised with how well it has worked. I had very low expectations. I do think the crop's better. We have saved water and we have saved on other inputs. So.
Another plus, the new technology also means they need less fertilizer and it reduces carbon emissions by 60 to 70%.
And that even if tomorrow we knew there was going to be stable rain for the rest of our lives, I would argue that you'd want to convert to a system like NDRIP or NDRIP.
The Central Arizona project is currently in the demonstration phase to see if this new system works, but they are optimistic that as NDRIP is an inexpensive way to bring a long-term solution to Arizona's water problem. In the newsroom, Diana Quintero, Cronkite News.
Last week, the Phoenix Parks and Recreation Board unanimously agreed to maintain hiking restrictions during extreme heat. Temporary guidelines were enacted over the summer after a series of mountain rescues left 12 firefighters with heat-related problems. Cronkite News health reporter Mason Lau spoke with one of those firefighters about the decision.
That customer called and they needed us, and so we responded. Just like at this time, the ambulance is going on a call right now.
Phoenix Fire Captain Scott Douglas has seen his share of rescues on trails around the city, including 2 this summer in 117-degree weather.
It was very hot, and there's no reprieve when you get to the top of a mountain. There's no trees, there's no shade. It does take a toll on us when we have to go up the mountain in the summer multiple times.
After one of the hottest summers on record, the Parks Board put temporary restrictions in place for some hiking trails between 11 a.m. and 5 p.m. when the National Weather Service issues an excessive heat warning.
Those mountains have been specifically chosen. They're just very remote in some areas as well. It's very hard to get to some of the positions that people end up getting into, and very technical when we have to bring them down.
Last week, the board made those restrictions permanent for Camelback Mountain's Echo Canyon and Cholla trails, and all trails associated with Piestewa Peak and Phoenix Mountains Preserve.
I think it's a very big safety hazard. I think especially tourists that come over. I mean, we've all heard stories about Camelback and people getting rescued or unfortunately passing away or kind of other severe circumstances. So I think it is important that they kind of limit the trails.
Phoenix Parks and Recreation have safety guidelines and reminders for hikers to be mindful of, including appropriate dress, accompanied hikes, and continuous hydration.
I'd say the thing that I focus on most in Arizona is just not getting overheated and not running out of water. So it does present a different set of challenges. It's hot outside and it's like you'd think you wouldn't have to worry about that. But even today I'm perspiring and something you definitely have to keep a watch on.
This is my 3rd time going hiking and it's kind of really hot. But I managed to make it up my first peak. It was just a little bit more difficult, especially coming down. The weight that I have, I kind of realized that I need to be more prepared, and I don't even have a water bottle.
In Phoenix, Ming-Sun Lau, Cronkite News.
The Parks and Recreation Department will post closures on its website and social media accounts. When trail access is limited, parking lot gates will be lowered.
Arizona is home to over 60 endangered or threatened species. Some species like the humpback chub are making comebacks, while others are still struggling. Nick Chesky is at the Google touchscreen to highlight some of the biggest threats to a few of the species in our state.
The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service reclassified the humpback chub from endangered to threatened status. The fish's population numbers have finally stabilized after a struggle that lasted decades. This fish is one example of a recent success story, but not all of the species in our state are thriving. A species population can be harmed by many things, and these things are called drivers of extinction. We have 3 really big ones here in Arizona: destruction of natural habitats, overhunting, and climate change. Now, destruction of natural habitats is one of the leading drivers of extinction all across the United States. When animals' resources get used up or destroyed, they struggle. Habitats can be destroyed either by humans or by changes in the climate. When humans build new infrastructure like buildings or roads, they alter the land cover and resources. The Sonoran tiger salamander is an example of a species here in Arizona whose population is on the decline because of its habitat's destruction. The salamanders need a lot of fresh water to survive, and with frequent dry seasons here in Arizona, our riparian systems and the salamanders are feeling the blow. But in the past, some animals were killed simply because they were not wanted in the landscape. In the 1800s, top predators like the Mexican gray wolf got overhunted close to extinction due to their predatory nation. Now, like the humpback chub, the wolves are also a success story, but a slower one. Right now, the wolf populations in the wild are growing, with over 180 estimated in the wild. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service explained to me that reintroducing a top predator like the Mexican gray wolf to this day is still a challenge because of the public opinion on the danger they possess. A third driver of extinction is climate change, and this one greatly impacts our insect population here in Arizona. The western butterfly populations are 1/1000th of what they were in the 1980s.
Heat is really difficult for them, especially extended periods of heat in the fall is what we found. That was detrimental to their growth and survivorship.
And you might ask yourself, why should I care? They're just bugs. Katie Prudick, an assistant professor at the University of Arizona School of Natural Resources and the Environment, explains the great importance insects hold.
But the problem is many things eat insects. Insects also create the next generation of plants. So, there's going to be, again, these rippling effects outwards that if insects aren't doing well, a lot of other species have a much higher potential of going extinct.
No single solution can save all endangered Arizona species, but extinction impacts everything in the environment. At the Google touchscreen, Nick Shesky, Cronkite News.
Despite cooler weather as we enter into the fall, temperatures outside are still very hot, especially in areas where there are fewer trees and grass. Reporter Isabella Fredrickson shares what the city of Phoenix is doing to cool down these areas, and it starts with the roads.
Over the summer, the city of Phoenix had piloted different formulas to see how they could help cool down our roads. Today, the city is moving into phase 2 of their Cool Pavement pilot program.
We did 9 projects throughout the city, and now we want to take that pilot label off, go citywide, and continue to invest in additional projects. We've tried parking lots, neighborhoods, and more dense city streets. We've gotten good results in all of them. We're going to look at different coatings of different colors to see what lasts the longest and produces the best results.
The coating will go over asphalt, which, while durable, holds in the heat.
Asphalt is a very absorbent material, and over the course of the day, the heat is absorbed into that asphalt, and at night when you're trying to get the break from the heat of the day is when most people are trying to escape the heat. That asphalt is slowly evaporating heat, and so when it's supposed to be cool at night, all the heat from that asphalt that has been stored throughout the day is now radiating out.
So far, with all of the testing and teamwork between the City of Phoenix, ASU, and GuardTop Sustainability, results have been good, prompting this next step.
Our residents told us they want us to look for solutions that make Phoenix more comfortable, particularly in the summer. We think Cool Pavement could do just that. 10 degrees cooling is a big deal. The streets department is also very interested because the streets are getting to be a lower temperature, and that may mean that they will last longer. So not only could it make our neighborhoods more comfortable, but fewer potholes.
It was exciting to see that not only are we getting temperature differences on the top of the asphalt, but the full depth of the asphalt is cooler.
In Phoenix, Isabella Fredrickson, Cronkite News.
During the next phase, researchers will analyze 2 new asphalt coverings to see if temperatures can be reduced even more and see how durable the coating really is.
Los Angeles may be known for its traffic, but one organization regularly shuts down major streets to give locals car-free days. Los Angeles reporter Amanda Day brings us to an open street day to show us how this can be good for the environment.
Can we make LA the most joyful city in the entire world? And we said, why not try that? Yeah. Why not do Ciclavia? 11 years later, 36 events later, 250 miles later, and 2 million people later.
Bikes, walkers, runners, and many others gathered on the streets of LA recently to experience Ciclavia. The executive director of Ciclavia says car-free days are fun, but climate change is the focus of their events.
We know that climate change is a very important issue for the entire world. And part of our work is to change behavior of individuals and people to make a more climate resilient community. What better way to encourage behavior change than joy and fun on bikes, on walking, rollerblading, to reduce your carbon footprint as individuals.
Car manufacturers have been improving environmentally. According to the Environmental Protection Agency, between 2004 and 2019, CO2 emissions for new vehicles decreased 23%.
It's a day where we actually see a reduction in NOx and SOx and carbon emissions because we have less streets actually in this central area of LA, which normally as a civic center would have a lot of pollution and congestion.
According to Ciclavia's website, they improve the air quality by 20% by reducing smog during their events held several times a year.
You begin to realize we probably own more bikes than we do automobiles in LA City. We just don't see them as much as we would like to.
Along with Los Angeles, Paris, Vancouver, and cities around the world have held car-free street days to improve pedestrian access without the chaos of cars. In Los Angeles, Amanda Day, Cronkite News.
According to Ciclavia, more than 1.8 million people have participated in the car-free street events.
There are about 500 species of birds in Arizona alone, making our state one of the top places to birdwatch. Cronkite News reporter Nicole Long spoke to a bird biologist about why maintaining a diverse bird population is important.
David Warrens has been interested in birds since he was young. Now, he's working with the Arizona Game and Fish Department to help protect dying species in their habitats for over 15 years. These are the thick-billed parrots, a species that disappeared in Arizona more than 80 years ago. Now, the remaining population is found only in the Sierra Madre Occidental Mountain Range.
And so right now, there's about 2,000 parrots in the world.
Juarez grew up surrounded by tropical forests and wildlife in El Salvador, Central America.
I kind of learned to observe different wildlife around the area, including birds. And so I think that's kind of where I started developing this appreciation for birds.
His appreciation for birds led him to be the Arizona Bird Conservation Initiative Coordinator.
We work with our partners in Mexico, an organization called OVIS, where they want to conserve the parrot, conserve the habitats, the areas that they use, and they also work with the communities. We're working with them to maintain those numbers, to increase those numbers, and to protect their habitat.
Juarez says bird watchers are a big help to gathering information about birds in their area.
So once you get into it, you can start contributing to science, because part of bird watching, the cool thing is you start to identify species, and then they can report that information. You know, besides keeping a personal list, they can share that with that becomes useful for conservation.
Juarez's love for birds and dedication to protect them has helped create community programs that contribute to conserving and restoring environments that impact bird populations. In the studio, Nicole Long, Cronkite News.
That's it for this special edition of Cronkite News tonight. Thanks for joining us. Break It Down is next.
Break It Down is brought to you in part by Mayo Clinic and viewers like you.
Hey, Angela, thank you for breaking down Black entrepreneurship in the post-COVID-19 era. Now, COVID-19 brought to light a lot of racial inequities. Are we still focused on racial disparities in entrepreneurship between white-owned and minority-owned businesses?
You know, Eleanor, I will definitely say yes and no, right? It's one of those. When you think about where we are as a society, you'll see that there has been an increased awareness around the wealth gap that exists for white, Black Americans. But then also you'll see that there has been an increase in educational resources, pitch competitions, et cetera. But conversely, when you begin to look at the statistics, you'll still see that there is huge gaps around the disparities that exist. For example, 53% of Black-owned businesses have shown at least a half revenue decline since the start of the pandemic against our white counterparts at 37%. Right. So numbers are still a little bit blaring.
And that brings me to a point. I continue to be amazed by the fact that industries just haven't embraced diversity. One of the reports you sent me said that if the revenue parity was closed between white and minority-owned businesses, it would add $290 billion, that's billion with a B, to the economy, which is just astounding. So in light of that, what's your recommendation for corporate executives who probably tend to be overwhelmingly white and or male? So what's your advice for them?
You know, when I think about the systems, right? Corporations, government, banking, it was all really created for white men or women.
Right.
And specifically, when you begin to dive deeper, they have to be intentional about their procurement processes. So literally looking at it on an annual basis, how are they spending their money? And then most importantly, look around the room. If it is homogeneous, then they definitely need to begin to maybe even expand out on their leadership team. Look and see how they can bring in more diverse leaders. I was speaking with a supplier diversity connection here in Arizona, and she asked me, would I consider changing the face of my organization, meaning bringing in a white person? Because people are typically used to doing business with people they know or trust or look like them, right? And so we have to begin to look at our practices, look at what our numbers are telling us from a corporation perspective. And if our numbers are sharing that we're only hiring white people, then we need to begin to look and see how we can be intentional about our practices.
In other words, Houston, we have a problem. And I just want to, I want to just point out here that the literature, as you know, I'm a psychologist, but the literature from organizational psychologists is very clear that companies that have diverse leadership make more money, make better decisions, have better business strategies. So again, diversity is profitable and just much more strategically oriented. So my next question for you, what are your recommendations for minority-owned business owners, minority entrepreneurs, and specifically Black entrepreneurs and Black female entrepreneurs like yourself?
Especially for Black businesses, we have to be prepared for when that opportunity exists. So whenever I work with Black businesses or businesses as a whole, I ask them to make sure that they have a strategic plan in place. So know and understand what those corporations are looking for. If certification is required, so having a women business certification, minority business certification, et cetera, make sure that you have all of those in place prior to even connecting with that organization and really understanding what their requirements are, whether it's being in their system, whether it's connecting with that supplier diversity first, but just understand what it takes for you to actually connect with that organization.
So having a strategic plan is critical. And then some of the information that you sent me, it seems like collecting the information is not as desirable as it could be. For example, the Arizona Commerce Association, what's your recommendations for even collecting information related to not just minority-owned businesses, but also female-owned businesses as well?
Other states do this very well. At conception, when creating small businesses, they actually collect data, demographics, information on the businesses so that they know exactly who's in their ecosystem, right? So you know what doesn't get measured doesn't grow. Exactly. And so we have to begin, first of all, by understanding who's in the game. And then by understanding who's in the game, you can begin to break down what their specific needs are. You understand their growth patterns or lack thereof. And so you can definitely begin to allocate additional resources towards businesses.
Now, what do you think are the reasons why data collection is not as desirable as it could be? And you mentioned other places do it better. So can you tell me like which states collect information far better than say Arizona?
One state that does this extremely well is Texas. So Texas is very intentional about cultivating the ecosystem that they want to see. And so they do a call for minority businesses, for women businesses. So they're very intentional about their procurement process, whereas Arizona isn't as intentional. I'm not quite sure what happened, but I know it transpired a couple of decades ago where Arizona had removed the demographics from the business formation process. And so bringing that back would create intentionality. It would help to even out the playing fields, right? So we'll begin to understand the business ecosystem here in Arizona and what the needs are for women businesses. One of the things that I was challenged with personally coming into my business, you know, as I started talking to different people, state officials, I was told that women businesses aren't important and they're not on the radar here in Arizona because we tend to be a lifestyle business. But like me, I have a consulting firm that works with larger organizations, government entities. I know women that are in construction, women that are in security, HVAC, et cetera. And so we are far beyond lifestyle. You know, we are making an impact on our community. And the powers that be, the government system needs to understand that.
So you mentioned the bad. Can you tell me something good that's occurred since you started your consulting business?
Yeah, so there has been some phenomenal things. Let me say this. I was looking at my numbers over the past week, and I would say 92% of my business is actually outside of Arizona. What has transpired since COVID is I've been extremely intentional when there are organizations that are doing a call specifically for minority businesses. I respond, right? So that goes back to preparation opportunities. So, I responded. I was able to secure several large contracts since the pandemic. Don't lose sight of what's going on inside for what's going on around you, right? So be agile, understand what's going on, and respond to those requests as soon as possible.
Okay, and before we close, where can we find you?
I'm at argccgroup.com. You can find me on my website. You can also find me on Facebook and LinkedIn.
Thank you, Angie. Thank you for breaking down minority-owned businesses in the context of after COVID-19. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Eleanor.
This hour of local news is made possible by contributions from the Friends of PBS, members of your PBS station. Thank you. If you have comments about Arizona PBS News, please contact us at one of the addresses on your screen. Thank you.